Today we're going to be looking at the Open Spanish. It is crucial to know the theory in the Open Spanish because this is one of the most playable variations for black in the Ruy Lopez. So the closed Spanish starts after the moves 1e4, e5, knight to f3, putting pressure on the e5 pawn and the d4 square, and knight c6, defending against the threat of knight takes e5. And after these two moves are played, the most commonly played move is bishop to b5, known as the Ruy Lopez or the Spanish game. This is very good opening because it is pressuring the black position from the third move of the game. As you can see, there is a lot of tension in the center, and the move bishop b5 is indirectly attacking the center because it is threatening to take the c6 knight. So after bishop to b5 is played, the most commonly played move is a6. We retreat our bishop with bishop to a4, and we don't enter the exchange variation of the Ruy Lopez, which is to take this knight on c6. So after bishop a4 and knight f6, black is simply attacking our e4 pawn, but the most commonly move played here is the move short castles. And in this position, the most playable move, the most played move, is bishop to e7, just trying to get closed Spanish positions. But as you can see, the e4 pawn is hanging, and this f6 knight can take this e4 pawn. And with knight takes e4, black enters the open Spanish. This is a very complicated opening, very complicated variation in the Ruy Lopez, so it is very crucial to know this theory. So after knight takes e4, there is only one move for white, and this is the move pawn to d4, just striking in the center and asking black what he is going to do. And here, of course, 99% of the time, people play the move b5, but there is one more sideline you really need to know, and this is if black just call your bluff and take this, I'm sorry, and takes this d4 pawn with pawn takes d4. As you can see, we can recapture this pawn with knight takes d4, knight takes d4, and queen takes d4. But the best move in the position and the theoretical move here is the move rook to e1, attacking this knight, and knight cannot move because the knight is pinned to the king. So after the move rook e1, there is only one move, and this is the move d5. And only now, when this knight is pinned as well, we take the d4 pawn with knight takes d4. And after knight takes d4, there is again only one move that black can play, and this is bishop to d6, with a very interesting idea. And of course, as you can see, we can take the c6 knight, and if black were to capture it, we would win the exchange because of this fork on c6. So after bishop d6, we just take this knight on c6, and we ask black what he's going to do. And here black has a way not to lose an exchange, and this is the move bishop takes h2. And of course, we cannot take the bishop because of the check with the queen, with queen to h4. Let me just quickly show it to you. So after king takes h2 and queen h4, after king g1 and queen takes f2, there is nothing to do, it's just a perpetual check, and the game ends in a draw. So after bishop takes a2, the main move is of course to play king to h1, and after queen to h4, this is very tricky, but here there is only one move that white can play, and this is the move rook takes e4, sacrificing an exchange, and after d takes e4, we play queen to d8, trading the queens, and after the knight takes the queen on d8, this is check, so black must recapture this knight, and after king takes d8, we just recapture this h2 bishop, and as you can see from the position, black has 2 rooks and 1 bishop, and we have 2 bishops, a knight and a rook, but black has 2 pawns extra. But this position is better for white, no matter the pawns, because 2 pieces in the middle game or in the early end game are much better than the rook. So black will try to use this pawn majority on the king side and on the queen side, and we as white will play something like bishop e3, knight c3, and pressuring black position. So this is the sideline in the open Ruy Lopez after the move pawn d4, but of course the main move is pawn b5 indeed. So after b5, of course, we just play bishop to b3, and here black has only one move. This is pawn to d5, and we take the e5 pawn with d takes e5, and after bishop e6, the only move. There are 2 possible moves here for white. One is very good and one is less good, and the 2 moves are pawn to c3, which is the sideline, and the main line is knight b to d2. And I, in this position, recommend you to play knight b to d2, but as black players, you need to know pawn to c3 as well. So we'll go over pawn to c3 first, and after c3, I recommend you as black to play bishop to c5, just putting some pressure on f2 pawn. You will see why. And after knight b to d2, black castles, and after this move, we play bishop c2, pressuring the e4 knight, and here is the crucial move, knight takes f2, and after rook takes f2, here black does not take the rook, because the rook is pinned and there is no way not to lose an exchange. Black firstly play the move f6, and after white recapture the f6 pawn, then black takes the rook on f2, and after king takes f2, queen to f6, and the theory goes for a few more moves after knight f1, knight e5, pressuring, of course, the white knight, which is pinned on f3, and after bishop e3, rook a to e8, and bishop to c5. Here, black, of course, plays the move rook to, I'm sorry, here, of course, yes, here, black recaptures the knight on f3 with knight takes f3, and after g takes f3, now black plays the move rook to f7, saving the exchange. And after king to g2, you can see that white has 2 pieces versus a rook, but in this position you can see that white king is very open and that these 2 pawns are very weak, and with some attacking chances along the f file and along the semi-open g file, I think black is better here, and pawn to c3 on the 9th move of the game should not be a thing in the highest level if you want to play the Ruy Lopez perfectly. So I recommend you in this position after the move bishop to e6 to play knight b to d2, and now there are a few options for black. There are 3 options actually. Knight c5, the main line. There is bishop to c5, the sideline, and another sideline with bishop to e7. So we will first look at bishop to c5, and after this move, we just take the knight on e4 with knight takes e4, d takes e4, and here we don't recapture the queen. On d8, we play knight to g5, and after queen takes d1, we recapture the queen with rook takes d1, and after bishop takes b3, ab3, you can see that although the position is balanced, I think white is slightly better here because of the semi-open a file and the activity of d1 rook, And of course you can see that these two pawns are going to fall no matter what, because you cannot really defend these two pawns. So in this position I think white is better, and that bishop c5 on the ninth move shouldn't be played too often. So of course it is a good surprise. You want to make sure your opponent does not know the theory, but this is not the best that black can play, and white will have an opening edge. So black can try bishop to e7, another sideline. After bishop to e7 we play c3 now, and after black castles, bishop c2 is the theory, and of course we pressure the knight, and black plays f5, and now we could take this pawn with en passant with e takes f6, but the best move in the position is knight to b3 actually, and after queen to d7 we play knight f to d4, and after black takes we take back with the knight, and after c5 we take the e6 bishop, and after queen takes e6 we play f3, knight g5, and a4 should be played. And now of course why black doesn't want to open the a file for our rook, so he move our his rook to d8, and after we take, black recaptures, and you can see that black didn't trade the pair of rooks, and I think here white has an opening edge. You can see that we have this passed pawn that can be protected with rook to e1 or with something like bishop to f4. And of course this knight is slightly out of the game. It will have to go to f7 to pressure this pawn, and these queenside pawns are pretty attackable, if you will, because there is not a good way to defend these pawns. And with something like rook to a5 even in the future, these pawns are going to be weak. So I think the best continuation after knight b2 d2 is the main line with knight to c5. And after knight to c5, now white really has only one move, and this is the move pawn to c3, trying to save this bishop with move bishop to c2. And now once again black has a few options. The main line goes bishop to e7, but there are a few sidelines with pawn to g4, with knight takes b3, or with bishop to g4. So let me just show you bishop to g4, firstly because it has the last theory, and after bishop to g4 we just save our bishop, not allowing to take it with knight takes b3, and after bishop c2, bishop e7, black is trying to castle, and after rook e1, now black has two options. Black can castle, or black can play queen to d7, and queen to d7 is the main line. So let me just show you what to do after black castles, and after black castles we just play knight to b3, trying to trade off this pair of knights, and black doesn't want to trade the knight, and he declines the trade with knight to e6, and here we play queen to d3, threatening the checkmate, and of course the only good way to protect the mate is of course pawn to g6, and after bishop h6, rook to e8, you can see how many black weaknesses black player has. Of course this king side is pretty weakened, and white has a really big opening edge. So this is not a very good way of playing, and after rook e1, queen to d7 should be played. And after queen to d7, knight f1, we are trying to fulfill our Ruy Lopez maneuver with knight to d2 and then knight to f1, and trying to get to g3 or even to e3 in the future. So after rook to d8, knight to e3, attacking the bishop, and after bishop h5 we play b4, and after knight e6, here we play g4, and after bishop to g6, I'm sorry, we play knight to f5, declining this trade of bishops. So here you can see that black has this very weak a6 pawn, and that these queenside pawns are stopped by our queenside pawns, and we'll try to play a4, maybe trade this set of pawns and open up the a file. And of course this pawn is weak for the time being, but we made some weaknesses with pawn to g4. But here white is slightly better, and bishop g4 in this position after c3 is not particularly good variation for black. So after c3, we'll just look at knight takes b3, which is not the optimal way of playing, but you need to know what to do. After knight takes b3, we just recapture the bishop with knight takes b3, and after bishop e7, knight f to d4, knight takes d4, c takes d4, you can see that we have a big center, and that this pawn is very weak because c5 is never a thing. So after a5, we play queen to c2, trying to put pressure on the c7 pawn, and the theory here is pretty long. Let me just quickly show it to you. After queen to d7, bishop to d2 is the main move, and after bishop f5, queen c1 is the main move, still putting pressure on c7 pawn, and after a4, knight c5, queen to c6, bishop to b4. Here black plays the move queen to g6, maybe looking at bishop h6 or some other tricks, but we play just queen to d2, and if black castles, we play rook ac1. You can see black has few weaknesses, and this position is pretty much better for white, of course. So this knight takes b3. Of course, black has the bishop pair, but I'm sorry, in this position, black has the bishop pair, but white has a pressure down the open c file, and these two pawns are very, very weak. So white is better in this position, and of course, after c3, there are two moves we didn't look at, and the first one is bishop e7, the main line, but there is one more sideline I need to show you. This is the move pawn to d4. And after pawn to d4, you can see that this diagonal has opened up, and that we can trade the bishop for e6 bishop. So we will do it with bishop takes e6, knight takes e6, and after c takes d4, knight c takes d4, we here play a4, and we have a very good position. Of course, a4 being an idea of pretty much every single variation in the Ruy Lopez. Of course, trying to make these pawns worse, trying to make some weaknesses that we will be able to use in the middle game or the early end game. So d4 here, white is better and black has to equalize, but of course the main line is bishop to e7 actually, and after bishop to e7 we play bishop c2, we save our bishop, not allowing to take it with knight takes b3, and after bishop to c2 we play black plays the move d4. Although there is one more sideline you need to know, this is the move bishop to g4, and after bishop to g4, rook e1, and this is not a theoretical position, but you need to know this rook belongs on e file supporting the e5 pawn, and you will play knight f1, knight g3, and h3, and this bishop will usually develop to e3 or maybe to f4 in the future. So bishop g4 is not really a thing in this position. Moving the bishop once again, this is not particularly good, but it was played before. So, but the main line, of course, is pawn to d4, and after pawn to d4 we play knight b3 here, and after d3 this is a very complex theoretical position, and here we play bishop to b1. After knight takes b3 we take back with the a pawn, of course, and after bishop to f5, bishop to e3 should be played, and you can see that this passed pawn is of course dangerous for white, of course, we need to defend because it is only 2 squares away from winning, but if you know the theory, you will be fine. So after bishop e3, black castles, we played bishop to d4, trying to take this pawn. Of course, the queen is not protecting this pawn anymore, so black here plays the move queen to d5, just putting pressure on b3 pawn, so we cannot really take this pawn because of queen takes b3 followed by something like rook to d8, and we'll be under severe pressure. So after queen to d5, we play rook to e1, and pawn d2 should be played by black, and after rook to e2, bishop takes b1, rook takes b1, and after knight takes d4, bishop g5 should be played, of course defending the d2 pawn, and after g3 we're preparing something like f4 or maybe even h4. Black needs to react because we're just threatening to play f4, just winning this pawn. So the theory goes c5, knight to f5, and after queen to d3, putting some pressure on the white position. Now we play the move knight to d6, and after queen to g6 we play h4. Of course, the pin on this g pawn will be made after bishop takes h4, and that is what black plays. Bishop h4, of course, we cannot take because of this pin, but as you can see, after rook takes 2 and bishop e7, we traded this h4 pawn for this dangerous pass pawn on d2, and this was, of course, the main line of the open Spanish positions. And in this position, you can see that we have severe pressure down the d file, and this knight is very nicely placed. It is pressuring some of black weaknesses, and of course, we'll play something like king to g2, as you can see, king to g2, maybe even trying to play something like queen h1 or queen e2, and then rook to h1, putting some pressure down the semi-open h file. So this was the open Spanish theory after the fifth move, knight takes e4. So if you like the video, make sure to subscribe, and see you guys in another video.